Good day, everyone. My name is Matt Tranchen, and I serve as president of March for Science. It's a privilege to be with you on Earth Day. I am joined by my friend, colleague, and compatriot, Hita Lakhani, Global South Focal Point for Youngo. Hita, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, Matt. How are you today?
I'm well, and I know we have a really special guest joining us. Would you kindly introduce our dear friend?
Yes, today we have a very special guest, a very dear friend of mine from India, Archana Soreng. Archana is a member of the Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group. She's a researcher working on documenting and studying about traditional practices of indigenous communities. Archana, it's such a pleasure to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Hita, and thank you, Matt, and thank you, March for Science. It's a pleasure, and I feel so happy to be here in this space on this Earth Day.
Archana, we love having you join us. To jump right in, of course, you are one of 7 members of the Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group. This is a novel creation to provide young people with an opportunity to truly inform global climate action at the highest level. Would love your perspective of what this experience has been for you. And of course, you all issued a report at the end of last year. What are the major takeaways for folks tuning in? Would you like them to know?
Yeah, thank you so much. So the key insights and call to action for the international communities and world leaders, which has been incorporated in a global outreach outcome report of 2020, has been one thing which has come out very, very strongly is that the youth want investment on green jobs because climate anxiety intertwined with uncertainty of jobs has led to a strong demand in green jobs. But when we are talking about green jobs, the youth are also worried because green job does not have any agreed taxonomy of definition. They're also worried that it should not happen greenwashing, and thereby youth feel that it is very important that climate education and opportunities in terms of green jobs creating more employment is one of the key major takeaway and demand of the youth. And the second thing which came out very strongly is to not bail out polluting industries, because I think we youth strongly believe, and we do not want money to be wasted more longer in terms of bailing out polluting industries and fossil fuel subsidy. That is very important, but at the same time we are also considerate and we are also demanding that there is just a transition wherein the communities, those who are engaged in the polluting industries, are supported and enabled for the just transition. The third thing which came out very strongly is that the indigenous and the local communities needs to be an integral part of the decision making process of the climate strategies. Another thing which has come out very strongly and emphasized that indigenous communities across the globe have been victims of gross human rights violation. And it was also shared by the youth joining us that even during the COVID pandemic, the human right violation over the indigenous and local communities did not stop. And that is where protection of the indigenous communities has to be core elements of climate action policies, wherein the free, prior and informed consent is taken into consideration in whatever policies and strategies are being made. And at the same time, it will be recognizing, enforcing, and respecting the rights of indigenous and traditional communities over the land and territories is one of the very, very key thing which came out in the report. Yeah. And the last thing which came out in the report very strongly is that we youth are willing to work together, leaving no one behind. But the principle which needs to be adopted for this is intergenerational equity and intersectionality.
Absolutely, Archana. I think these are very, very valid outcomes that have come out, very important, showcasing how youth from across the world understand what is going on, they want to see change, and they're willing to be a part of the change. From that, as a young indigenous person yourself, coming from the same country as me, coming from India, what does it feel for you? What are the next steps that we need to take in order to fill these gaps? In the international community, now we're slowly talking about the role of indigenous peoples, especially even in the UNFCCC framework. There's a local communities and indigenous peoples platform, the LCIPP, and there's a constituency for the indigenous people. But do you think there is enough that we're doing already? Do you think that voices are being heard? And if not, where are the gaps and how can we fill them?
Yeah, I think one of the key important gaps or what can be done, which I strongly feel, is that we need to go beyond token participation of the indigenous people, wherein we invite indigenous people to hear from them. Rather, I feel it is important to act on what they are saying and they have been proposing or advocating for in the climate action spaces. So that is very important. And the second thing which is very important in terms of how do we need to go ahead, I think it is very important to also acknowledge and understand that how language barrier is preventing more and more indigenous and local communities to participate in this entire discourse of climate action. So I think steps needs to be taken, whereas there is dissemination of information in different languages, and wherein I feel the youth can play a very important role. And at the same time, not only in terms of dissemination of knowledge, but also ensuring that when there is any dialogues, that interpretations are available wherein we can bring grassroots level indigenous youth and indigenous leaders wherein their voices can be heard. And the third thing which is very important, I strongly feel that in the negotiation process or in the negotiation space, the indigenous people need to have seat at the table. That would be really, really very important and need to be pushed forward, as this year is a global year for climate action, having like lots of, we have conference of parties this year.
Archana, historically, the science community has really disregarded indigenous knowledge and insights. As the world tries to rectify that and ensure that traditional knowledge and practice is not only being listened to, but actually informing climate action around the world. Can you speak to the process underway to help that knowledge transfer from within these local communities to these international climate change negotiations that are taking place?
Yeah, I think first and the foremost, which is important, is to acknowledge and address that there has been systematic colonial inferiorization as well as racism with the indigenous people and the indigenous knowledge system in general. Post acknowledgement, what is important is to ensure that these traditional knowledge and practices are supported and also respected. And for respecting this, one of the core important factor which comes into because of the intersectionalities and how it is interlinked is that recognition of rights of the indigenous people. Because unless and until indigenous people are secure, they will not be able to continue to continue with the traditional knowledge and practices. So protecting them, enabling them to continue what they are doing is very important, wherein the perspective of funding, supporting, protection comes into place. At the same time, moving beyond how international communities and how in the international spaces we can have the traditional knowledge and practices, I think there needs to be investment in terms of research and education, wherein indigenous traditional knowledge practices are being enabled, wherein we are getting more opportunities in terms of doing research on that, and resources are allocated. And in that front, I feel the indigenous young people can lead a very pioneering path wherein they themselves are doing research on their communities and they are being supported with the entire science community. So making space for that would be really important and having those acceptance.
Archana, we have a very diverse audience tuning in. I mean, young people from around the world, as well as, foundations, philanthropists, a lot of corporate leaders. What are some examples of opportunities to invest in the kind of research that you're talking about for those who are in a position to give and make a contribution, have an impact? Where should they channel those resources to have the greatest impact?
Yeah. One thing which I strongly feel when it comes to young people is, in terms of any jobs which we are talking, people look for experience rather than commitment. And that is one of the issue which the young people face, that, if you are not experienced, you'll not get jobs, no matter how much conviction or commitment which you have. So when we are all talking about green jobs and green COVID recovery, it is important that the indigenous communities and local communities, those who are already practicing their community-led forest protection practices or the eco-friendly way of living, sustainable farming. So research projects and job opportunities are also created, wherein the indigenous youth are able to document that the indigenous youth are able to continue with those tradition, and wherein they're also getting financial remuneration for them. So we need to see that the indigenous people are indigenous youth are the guardians of the nature, and wherein they are also allocated resources to do so. So that is one of the thing which is very important. At the same time, we have young indigenous entrepreneurs and women who are doing exemplary work in terms of forest-based livelihood, which is alternative to plastic pollution, because of the articles which, because of the things which they are being creating, like for example leaf plates, or whether it is chairs, and whether it is furnitures, and whether it is mats, all those things which are alternative to plastic pollution. So it is important to also give them the due credit of the or of the things, eco-friendly things which they are making. And when I say due credit, it has to be in terms of the financial remuneration also, because there is often instances wherein these initiatives or these ideas are being co-opted or hijacked from the indigenous people, and it is being sold in much higher prices, wherein the indigenous people are not receiving any of those benefits. So I think, again, giving those opportunity for the indigenous people would be really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one word that you've kept saying is enabling spaces, right? So it's not that we need to teach them. It's not like we have to create some sort of capacity building. This capacity exists already. We just need to have a space where they're able to do what they're doing. They're able to continue. So we just don't have to hinder their work, and give them the resources which basically helps to take the work forward, whether it's finance, whether it's just rights, whether it's legal protection, whether it's amplifying their voices. I think some very, very great points coming out of this discussion, Archana. So today's topic the title for today is Unite Behind the Science. And we have been talking about traditional knowledge, how traditional practices are actually guiding the way that we have been living for so many years. We're just losing track now. Coming back to the science, what do you think is the one thing that we should do, or that you would want the international community to do, in order to reach the goal for our climate ambition?
I feel, we have been saying it for so long, but it is trust the science and believe the science is what I would like to say, because it's been there for a long, but it's we who have been denying it. And that is where on this earth day, I would say, believe the science, trust the science, and let us act towards climate action. Because even science is very clear, which says that indigenous people has to be core of climate action. Their rights needs to be recognized, and their leadership needs to be supported. So yes, science is clear. We need to act very strongly in terms of what has been already said by the scientists and what is already said by the science. But at the same time, I also would like to emphasize that it's not that science has told this, we'll act whenever we want to do. I think it is important to act right now.
Archana, of course, later on Earth Day, you will be speaking at the Biden Climate Summit, which will involve, world leaders from across the globe, making bold statements and commitments with regard to climate action. And I know you'll have quite a few messages to deliver to the Biden administration and the world that will be tuning in. But given your opportunity to help advise and inform the Secretary General, I'm curious. Can you give us a teaser of what your message will be at this global forum for all the world leaders who will be tuning in?
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for for that question. I would strongly would like to say to the world leaders that for us, indigenous and local communities, nature is not something that we are mere part of. For us, nature is a source of identity, culture, tradition. And as per the worldview of indigenous people, it is we who are nature. It's not part of nature. So I strongly feel that it is important that the climate policies and strategies respects and acknowledges the relationship of indigenous people with nature and make them integral part of this decision-making process of climate action.
I think that's a very strong sentence, Archana. Thank you so much for that. Closing out with our final question now for you. Young at March for Science have been working together on a Science Not Silence campaign, which basically highlights the role of the IPCC 1.5 degree special report, which came out in 2018. Why do you think it is important, or why do you think it is significant for this report to be formally welcomed at COP26?
I strongly believe that this report needs to be welcomed at COP26 because we all are amidst COVID-19 pandemic. And at the same time, the climate crisis did not stop. We were affected by COVID-19 pandemic and also the climate crisis last year and this year with forest fires, floods, and cyclone all across. And I, coming from a place which was affected by forest fire and cyclone, I strongly believe that we cannot no longer respect and trust sciences. Rather, when we see COP26 as a very important conference of party and an important event or the dialogue process, I think in this year of 2021, when it's a global year of make and break, it would be really, really important for the world leaders and countries to commit to the report of IPCC and thereby ensure that they are revising their commitments in their NDCs.
Well, Archana, again, it's an absolute pleasure having you join us today. I'll say I think everyone understands the importance of young people having a seat at the table, to have that opportunity to engage and inform what world leaders do. Hearing your words today is a powerful reminder of just how important what young people have to say. And frankly, I, for one, really hope that world leaders who are tuning into the Biden Climate Summit on Earth Day listen to you, my friend. You're an inspiring leader, and thank you for joining us. It means the world to us.
Thank you so much, Archana.
Thank you so much, Matt and Hita.